I'm Angeline with B-Sides, and I am so excited to be hanging out with Galimatias again. Hi, Gali, how's it going?
Hey Angeline, good to see you again.
Good to see you too. What have you been up to? Where are you living these days?
I am living actually in the same place that I was last time we spoke. Last time I had just moved in here, so when we spoke about Renaissance Boy, that was all made in a different place. And I moved in here. We must have talked like, yeah, in fall of 2020. That's where I just moved to here. So now I've been here since then for 5 years. So I made this new album in this space. And I kind of had a lot of yeah, I have a much bigger room here and have had the option to expand in terms of instrumentation and stuff. So this is the first time that I have like an actual piano. I got a piano in the back here. So I've used the piano a bunch on this new project. But yeah, I really like this space here. I mean, I could kind of show you a little bit because I'm on my laptop if you want to see some of it. It's just kind
Yeah,
of
would
messy
love
in
a
here.
tour. Yeah.
Yeah, I could give you a little tour. Um, I have the piano over here in the corner. And then I have a Rhodes here, which is kind of like a newer edition. Then I've got some synths that I use. I got a lot more synths over here in this sidecar kind of thing. Um, and something I've started doing a lot is I'm using this patch bay here. And
Mm.
that's really nice because you can kind of connect everything you have in the studio to the patch bay, and then that makes doing connections between things very easy. So that's something that was very foreign to me before, but my friend Jacob Reski, who's a very amazing producer, he put me on to patch bays. So now I have like everything connected to the patch bays. That means, for example, if I'm playing on the piano, the mics are going into the preamp, then I could just on the patch bay say, okay, let me take the piano and put that through a tape echo and then put that through a reverb and then go into the recording software so you can kind of like experiment a lot more with sound. And traditionally, you would have to like go and take the wire from one thing and put it to the other and then put it to the third. But here you can just kind of like everything is on the front of this thing. So that was a game changer to me. And that kind of like made me able to do a lot more, I think, sonic exploration in the studio, having that. So yeah, I love it. I love it here.
That's amazing. I'm really happy for you, really excited. Speaking of the album, congratulations.
Thank
It's
you.
been 5 years since Renaissance Boy, and you just came out with 22nd Century. Tell us a little bit about sort of how this project came to be. I saw that you were like responding to some fans, and you mentioned like Firestorm was sort of the song, the first track that kind of came to be on this album. Tell us more about the
Yeah.
concept of this.
Yeah, I was working for a while after finishing or after putting out Renaissance Boy and just trying to figure out like what the new direction would be. And I was kind of doing some more funk sounding stuff and I just didn't really see like the conceptual direction with that thing. And so it never really went anywhere. I was kind of like experimenting for a whole year. And and then yeah, I think Firestorm was the first track that I wrote maybe like a year later, so in 2021 at some point, that I was like, "Oh, this feels like here's something that I could expand upon enough to like make a whole album." Um, so it wasn't until then that I really started feeling like I had a direction for a new album. Um, and and then, I started writing a bunch of different songs. They don't all relate to like the same um, topic, but at the time I was reading like a bunch of books about yeah, kind of like how attention is under attack in this day and age with like how everything seems to be condensed into like shorter and shorter segments and everything is just vying for our attention and we have like so much input always at our disposal. It becomes very hard to first of all focus on what's most important to you because it's very easy to give into just consumption and always be consuming. So I think it takes a lot of discipline to like manage your sort of mental diet or your yeah, just like the input that you expose yourself towards. Um and there's a couple books that I really resonated with. There's one called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, and he actually wrote this in I think I think it came out in very early 90s and he was writing it about television, but if you read that book and just replace TV with social media, it feels like almost even more apt because it was a lot of it was a lot of the same things that he was worried about with TV that shows itself in modern digital media. And it's just something that I think a lot about myself because I think when you're trying to create something, you're really obviously you're trying to figure out what's intrinsically important to you and you're trying to connect with something inside yourself. But if you're always exposed to input from the outside, it can be very hard and it can be very distracting to you. And and so I think for myself at the time, that's kind of what I was dealing with was trying to figure out how do I even like what how do I even retain my identity when there's like so many impressions coming um at all times from the outside. Um So yeah, I think largely I would say that 22nd century, like the name comes from that of like everything being like shorter and shorter. And then it's kind of like an antithesis to that in and of itself, the fact that it's sort of made to be this longer piece. I spent a lot of time like kind of tying everything together, in the same way that I did for Renaissance Boy. But of course, it doesn't mean that every single song on the album is about that, but that's kind of like what I thought about as the overarching theme.
Yeah, I definitely heard that when I was listening to the album. It was interesting that you put like these background clips of like what you would kind of hear if you were like scrolling on TikTok, like, oh, like
Hmm.
here are the new diet fads, or like check out these new trends, sort of thing. And I was like, I
Hmm.
thought that was very interesting. I think this is like a great social commentary to, how people digest media these days and kind of how we're kind of bombarded by these short form medias and it's just constantly like thrown at us. And you can definitely lose yourself and your entire identity if you don't take time to kind of step back, which I will say Vipassana is one of my favorite because it's not only is it short, but it's also just like, yeah, I should just take a step back, inhale, exhale. But it was also interesting on that track. I think I was looking at the album yesterday, how you sampled, it seems like a Mongolian track on there as well.
Hmm.
Like I
Yes.
was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like what kind of how did you find this track? Like what about it made you want to add it to this particular to your album, but also to this particular track as well?
Yes. Yeah, it's a funny story with that track because uh I kind of started with like the production and I found that clip of the vocal that goes inhaling content, exhaling time. That was actually um from an ad that I found that I saw. I was just like saw this ad on, you know, while I was on the internet, and I was like, oh my God, that's such a brilliant line. And then went through like uh, so many attempts to try to like get to the rights holders and reached out to the company, and we just never get any response from them. And then we ended up talking to the director who had directed the actual commercial, and he was like, just use it, like that's fine. So so I end up using that. And then I'm just always like listening to things. I'm always listening for samples and stuff. And I came across this, yeah, this like it's a Mongolian. It's basically there's a French record label. They put out this compilation album. This is like way back in 2012, and it's so funny because like you listen to the compilation album, it's like house music, and then there's like just all this, and suddenly there's just like this one recording that's just we talked to the label and they're like, oh yeah, this is recorded on the steppes of Mongolia. It's like a nomad family and it's kind of like a folklore song, the song. And they sent us the lyrics and kind of told us about what the song is about. And it's basically about an orphaned calf, I think, like an orphaned calf. And the song is kind of like how about this one calf is without its mother and then all the other calves are walking around with their mothers, but there's one orphan calf. So it's basically about like solitude and loneliness. And I feel like even if you don't, you obviously everybody who's going to hear that track, they don't necessarily know. Not a lot of people, almost nobody's going to know what the lyrics are about. But it almost, I feel like it's almost translated into the way that she sings it is very like beautifully haunting. And I thought it paralleled well with kind of like what like the other line, the inhaling content, exhaling time,
Mhm.
and obviously there's a lot of talk about the loneliness epidemic and how us, you know, spending so much more time with our screens make us less social. And you could even it's the same thing in terms of like a parental context. If you think about uh, like somebody like Jonathan Haidt. I think he's like one of the writers that are most championing kind of reining in social media in terms of kids. Like I think a lot of kids they grow up and they see their parents just treating this thing that is the phone as like the most important thing. The kids associate all that attention you give to the phone with that meaning this being like a very, very important thing. Um, and and I think that to me, the whole track just kind of like meant through different sort of vignettes to kind of just give a sense of that. So I found that thing and I just like kind of like try to work with it and see if it fit on the track and I felt like it did. And I think to some people they're like, what is this? What's going on? But I just thought it was like a beautiful fit and yeah, we got the clearance to use it and stuff. And so I was like, hell yeah.
At first, I thought you were gonna talk about like how, people like kids these days are also just being not necessarily there's just a convenience to bringing up kids as like iPad kids just because like
Mm.
the parents are busy and all this stuff. So I thought that's what you were going to connect it to, but I think that
Yes.
also still can be very much connected to what you were saying.
No, but that's exactly what I mean is that if kids grow up and they see their parents, if a kid is like vying for a parent's attention
Hmm.
and they're competing against some device,
Hmm.
it's also a way to show the kid what is important in life, and they're going to grow up thinking that or yeah, developing a relationship to this thing as being like the most important thing in their life as opposed to their parent. I think that essentially uh love is like attention on some level, like as a
Hmm.
parent if you're gonna if you're gonna love your child, that has to manifest itself as attention. You can't just say I love you and then never be there. Then it's not you don't actually love your child. You have that has to manifest itself as attention, and I think so. It's just um that's a that's a thing that we all have to manage if and when we become parents. Is like where does your attention actually go?
Hmm.
So it is exactly what you're saying. And you see
Yeah.
this today, like if you go to
You
like
go to
any
a
restaurant or
restaurant.
something,
Yeah.
yeah, like parents are like, they're like they just give the child the iPad because then they don't have to like worry about anything. And you understand that too because it's kind of like a nice crutch to have. I think it's also like a social crutch. It's interesting, like if you like normally if you think like back in the day, if you see somebody out in public, like I don't know, like approaching a crosswalk or something, and then they're stopping and now they have to wait for the light to turn green. We used to just wait, but now it's like you pull out the phone, even if there's nothing there. I think that a lot of people that pull out the phone is almost more of like a signal to say like, like I got shit to do, I'm important. You know,
It's
you see
either
the same
that or
thing in
it's like
like
a force of habit or like, where
yeah,
it's just like it's just something that they're used to doing, right? You've been doing it
yes,
for
yeah,
long
yeah,
enough that they're just like, oh, I guess I'll check my phone. And I think that's
yes,
also low key one of my pet peeves. Like living in a very, I live in San Francisco and seeing people like walk around here, especially like in the financial district, people will just like walk around like heads down on their phone. And I'm just like, you should like look out for other people or cars or like, when you
yes,
can actually go. So it's definitely been more of a distraction tool, I feel, lately,
yes, yes,
personally as well. But
yeah.
yeah.
It's funny. I actually wrote another song about exactly that. That was um, about or more in the context of the experience that you have if you're like meeting somebody for the first time, like let's say like a date or something,
Hmm.
and them being like present with you versus like them being like on a phone or something like that. That is like a very clear indication of where like how do you prioritize your attention. And I think, I will always appreciate the people that I'm close to, that I make friends with, should be the ones where their attention is towards the other human. And
Hmm.
I wrote a song about this, and then uh, it's actually called no, it's called Eyes on You, and it's Boss, the rapper Boss. He released
Hmm.
it as his track. I kind of like gave the idea to him, but I was originally writing it as if like this, as if I'm on like a date with this girl, and then another guy comes and like tries to take her attention away. But it really was just the phone was the thing. It was like the analogy for it. And then he kind of like, you know, took that concept and wrote his own spin on it, which was really amazing. And then the funny thing is, in the chorus, I kind of took like that bell sound of like a message coming in and used that in the chorus. And then Apple actually used it in their keynote event this year for the new iPhone Pro. And I was like, this is so
That's
funny. This
so
is like very
crazy.
a full circle moment. And I
That's
don't,
so crazy.
yeah, and I don't think that they knew like the whole context of or the story of the
Yeah.
song. I think maybe they just heard that bell and they were like, oh, this is like perfect for her.
Yeah, yeah. This
But
reminds
that
us
was a
of,
funny thing.
a ringtone. This is
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so crazy. Oh my God. I'll have to re-listen to the song and keep an eye out for that bell then, and then also watch the keynote to see their use of it.
Yeah,
But
that's
uh
yeah, that was a fun
yeah.
one.
Well, speaking of Boss, this is possibly your third, maybe fourth collab with him. Second on an album because you had him on Renaissance Boy as well. You had him on this one. Sort of, what's been your process in selecting your collaborators? I know you also have a few like live instrumentalists that you've also like worked with for this album. I saw cartoons on there, and I was like, oh yeah, I've seen him before. He's amazing, so talented. You had Haley Niswanger on there on sax. Tell me a little bit more about your process there with collaborating with other artists.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm I usually just work on a song by myself till I feel like I can't really like if I feel like I get stuck or something, that's usually when I'll try to like reach out to somebody else. Or if I have like a specific idea, I think with the Pasana one, um I feel like I worked there's another guy that I worked a lot with. That's my one of my best friends from Denmark, Jeppe, and he's kind of been working. He's the one I've been working most with on this album, and he's kind of like helped me push a lot of them to the finish line. And we were working on the Vipassana one together, and I think we were just talking about like how a sax would sound really good on that, and Haley Niswanger is amazing on sax. But yeah, it's just kind of like track dependent, um, for the Don't Need to Know one. Uh, I can't even remember. I think I just had heard cartoons and heard his like amazing bass playing and was just like reaching out to him. Like, because I didn't know him before, I was just reaching out to him and asking. He was like super down to do it, and just made an amazing bass line. So yeah, it's just kind of like it's track dependent, and sometimes if I'm feeling stuck, maybe I'll try to send stuff to some other friends. Like Michael, he's a good friend of mine now. He lives very close by, and we often, just kind of like play stuff for each other and give each other feedback and stuff. And so I feel like it was always in the cars that we were going to make something. Same thing with Boss. He's also like super close and always down to work. So yeah, we'll always kind of like be sending stuff back and forth. Yeah.
I know that you've also mentioned that, you typically when you make a song, it's based on the sound first. But I know that for most of these tracks, you also sing on them. And it seems like a lot of the songs on this album are your most personal writing. And you've stepped further into, your vocal range and stuff like that. What kind of breakthroughs or shifts did you feel vocally or emotionally when you made this album?
Yeah, it's definitely true that the sound always comes first. I feel like there always has to be some kind of sound that like um is intriguing enough to get my inspiration going with kind of like seeing a path for the whole track. Um, but I think there's probably also some on this album where it kind of started uh vocally, like because I'll also often sit, either at the roads of the piano and just kind of like try to come up with chords and melodies. Um, but every single song is very different. It's like, I've had those one song that I where I wrote the whole thing on just piano and vocal. It was called Good Machine, and it was like I really loved the lyrics of this one, and it felt like it was like perfect uh for the concept of the whole album. But that one I just couldn't figure out how to produce it, so I never finished it. So so I have this whole song that I really like, but I just couldn't figure out how to produce it. And I think that's the problem is like a lot of times you kind of get stuck at the phase that you didn't start the process with. Like
Mhm.
if I start with production and I spend a lot of time on like finessing composition and sound design and stuff, then I will often get stuck in lyric writing or recording afterwards because then you always have most inspiration in the start of the process, and then now you're doing the other thing towards the end and maybe you just kind of can't take it to completion. And the same thing if you're doing it the other way around. If I'm starting on the piano and I'm writing the song, then maybe later I've listened to it so much that once I try to take it into production world, then I'm just like, what am I even gonna do with this? Like, I don't know. So the best case scenario is if you can kind of like do both at the same time,
Mhm.
because then yeah, you're just less prone to like stalling out on it. But I guess that's one of the disadvantages to, as much as I enjoy kind of like doing every part of the process myself here, one of the disadvantages of doing that is that you're more likely to get stuck because you don't always have somebody to bounce ideas off of with. And yeah, obviously it could be a long process. That's why it takes me like 4 years to make 13 tracks. Sometimes it just takes a long time, but it is also very enjoyable to me. And then maybe, sometimes in the future, maybe sometime in the future, that song that I made on the piano, maybe once I'm gone from it for like a year, I'll be listening to it again and maybe I'll think, oh, here's how I can approach this in terms of production and then really try again.
Hmm. That's, I know I was going to ask, is that sort of why this 5 year gap happened between Renaissance Boy and 22nd Century? But, it's part of your creative process. And I think the fans, I think this was really insightful for the fans, myself included.
Yeah.
You've released a lot of music as a studio artist, and you've only performed a handful of times. One of them being in San Francisco in like 2015, 10 years
Oh
ago.
yeah. Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
are are there any are there any plans to do any maybe like shows, like live shows, or maybe even like listening release shows? Tell us more about that.
Right now, I don't have anything in the cards right now, because I'm kind of trying to decide between whether I'm gonna dive into that or just kind of like work on new music. I think to me, the most fun is always making music and the thought of like it in a live context, you kind of have to like reinterpret the music that you've made.
Hmm.
And I think it would just be a big project and I'm not like I don't know if I'm certain yet that that's what I want to do. Like I feel like I've spent so much time on this album and I'm almost like ugh, like finally it's
Yeah,
done. I
yeah.
don't know. I would have to like definitely have to like work with some friends and stuff to like make that an enticing project. And I know that it would be. I think it could be like a really interesting um live show to do. Like maybe probably what I would start with was doing like a shorter kind of like live performance video or something where it's like fewer tracks.
Mhm.
Uh the thing is like yeah, it definitely is like a project to try to take it into a live setting because if you're writing in a more traditional sense, like you imagine you're a band and you're writing and you have like a guitar part and a bass part and a
Mhm.
drum part and a vocal part, it's like very one to one to take that into a live uh setting. But if all the sound is like sound design and all these very produced things, then you kind of have to figure out how to interpret that into a live setting. It's almost like you have to make the song again with elements that can be performed live, unless you're just doing a playback, which I think is not fun. Like if I'm going to live shows myself, I want to see like live music.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of artists who do. There's a lot of electronic artists who do really amazing live shows, like Sampha and James Blake, and so it's absolutely possible, but it's just like a bigger project that I haven't like taken on yet. But I feel like I definitely want to. It's kind of like a bucket list thing. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, I just don't know when.
No, that's fair. I mean, I feel like your music has so many layers to it, in terms of like the sound design and the production that it definitely would be a insane project to have to, create into a live show for like an hour and an hour and a half. So,
Hmm.
keep us posted. We're patiently waiting.
Great.
Um, But I think one of the last questions I wanted to ask was, I know that, speaking of, this evolution of your music and your sound and everything, you also released the Lost sequels to Urban Flora earlier this year.
Hmm.
I kind of wanted to ask, like, why did it feel like right now was the right time to release these extra tracks, and how did it feel revisiting that era creatively?
Yeah. So the reason why it was right now is because the 10-year anniversary for Urban Flora was this year. And so we had those tracks just laying around because those were some that we made back in 2016, probably, like after Urban Flora, we made those. I would think probably 2016, maybe even late 2015 or something. And they were just never released. And there's a couple other tracks from back then, and but I think those two are kind of like the standouts. So we were trying to figure out a way to put them out on like a anniversary edition of a vinyl for Flora, but then we couldn't really make it make sense with the record label that that we released Flora with. So eventually, we just put them out as two singles, like just, independently released. That's why they came out this year. They're old songs to us,
Mhm.
but to everybody else, they're like, they're new songs. They probably do sound like, um, yeah, like they belong to that
Yeah.
to that project more. That's also why we called it Lost Sequels. Um, but yeah, I'm super happy to have them out, and it was amazing to see like how many people have such a nostalgic relationship to that project. Like there was just so much outpouring of love for that project and those two new songs. So I'm super happy that we got to put it out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know my introduction to you was also through Urban Flora, so it was really exciting to kind of revisit that era with these two tracks. But it's also so great that you came out with a new album this year, that kind of speaks more to your evolution and kind of like where you are right now in your life. So yeah. Is there anything else in 2026 that fans can kind of expect from you? Are you planning to go to Denmark for New Year's?
I
Have
was
you
actually
been
just
back?
in Denmark. I was in Denmark in August.
Oh,
So
fun.
so I don't know if I'm gonna go for in December. I might just stay here.
Mhm.
Uh but yeah, for 2026, I'm kind of like I'm thinking of there's another project that I have in mind that I've been wanting to do for a long time. There's just like a very specific sound that I have in mind that I think it doesn't make sense to try to articulate because there's that quote, talking about music is like dancing about architecture. Like I know exactly what it sounds like to me, but if I try to explain it, it's just gonna sound like very weird. But yeah, there's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time that I've been putting off because I've been working on 22nd Century. So that's kind of what I'm gonna be uh, venturing into for 2026. I know that sounds super vague, but that's that's about as
It's
much as I can
okay.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing and for hanging out with me today, Golly. It's been so great talking about 22nd century and catching up. For anyone out there listening or watching, go listen to 22nd Century by Galimatias. I'm Angeline with B-Side. Thanks so much.